Hello everyone, my name is John Mitchell, and today I will be presenting the Pi-hole and VPN project that I did for the end of semester Raspberry Pi project for Computer Architecture 176. Alright, so an introduction discussing the general actions behind the Pi-hole and the VPN. The Pi-hole acts as a DNS server that prevents advertisements from running on compatible browsers, and the VPN allows for the Pi to act as a VPN provider where users on a network can stay protected by setting up their own profile. Now, some issues I encountered. I did try to do this in my dorm room at first on a public network. I'm sure a lot of other people encountered the same issues. However, I did have a personal router that was out of service. I ended up putting it back in service temporarily. Do not worry about this. I actually checked with my resident services to make sure that I could do this for a brief period of time, and it ended up getting everything to work just fine. So, more on that later, but yeah, this is just a general overview, letting you know what you're getting into. All right, so Pi-hole and VPN, a business case. Essentially asking the question, why would you need to do this? Why would you want this? So, for wanting a Pi-hole on the network, blocking ads can prevent network strain, actually, because you are not downloading as much content on browser due to not needing to download the advertisement content. And on top of that, in a more blunt and honest approach, advertisements are just plain annoying. There's a reason AdBlock Plus has millions and millions of downloads on Google Chrome, and that's because ads just have been getting more and more scummy these days. And for the VPN, I would hope that most of you know why you would want a VPN by this point. However, if you don't, that's okay. VPN allows for secure internet access via encryption/tunneling, and it is recommended as a common safety measure, especially when on public Wi-Fi, because you never know who is going to be on the other end there. You never know who could be up to some sneaky stuff. And yeah. All right, so how does this connect to computer architecture? Why does this project matter for the sake of this class? Well, I think personally that both parts of this Pi project, the Pi-hole and the VPN, are deeply reflective of the architecture of computing. The Pi-hole was a lot more simple, and it shows more how downloading, especially on file systems such as Linux, work and how they can act and what those downloaded programs can do on a local area network or later on in a WAN. So going forward from the Pi-hole, the VPN allows for a better understanding of area network architecture. And this project in particular focuses on things such as port forwarding and things such as altering IPv4 addresses, especially DNS server addresses, to alter network behavior on a LAN. And area network architecture is a vital piece of understanding greater computer architecture, in my opinion. I think that computers they need to communicate, right? And that's exactly what this project shows, especially in contrast to the other ones. This shows how the Pi can be used in more than just a computing power fashion. It sort of shows what potential it serves as a networking device, as something that you would see on like a big Cisco diagram instead of like, oh, this is what I use personally. Because the Raspberry Pi does have that functionality, and I think that was part of why it was chosen as the exemplary product for this class. But yes, going forward, that was my approach, and that was my understanding that this project demonstrates key concepts taught in the lecture and in the learning and in the reading. Sorry. So yeah, the procedures that I followed include some pretty basic guides that the professor provided to us. Now, there was only one thing that I had to change, which was the first one over here to the left. I had to change some of the DNS, and there's more on that on this slide right here. So while setting up the Pi-hole, there was an option in the procedures at the end of that guide. It told me, hey, if you want this to immediately affect all of the devices on your network, you want to go into your router and set it to have the Pi's static IP address as the router's DNS server address. Now, for whatever reason, when I did this, it bricked my network and I was absolutely unable to use it. I think that it may have been because the Pi's address changed after I had to set up the Pi-hole a second time. However, after trying it again, it didn't seem to work. I did not include this in troubleshooting. Instead, I included this in this slide specifically because there was no resolution there. So what I had to end up doing was on my own personal device, whether that was my phone or in this case my computer, I had to go in and set the preferred DNS server to be the Pi's static IP address serving as the Pi-hole ad blocker, which in my case, instead of it being 0.115, it was 192.168.1.7. So now here are some results. The installation for the Pi-hole was simple. The results of my own download are shown here. This is the initial download screen, just to show that it kicked off. Also, I think the graphic looks really freaking cool. The bottom image is the most important. Now, this was taken on my PC that I'm using right now the other day after I successfully got it up and running. And this is the admin screen. So you see right there in the second snip that after you get the Pi-hole set up, it gives you credentials wherein you go to your browser, and because it doesn't give you, it actually, sorry, forgive me, it does give you a URL where it can translate the DNS and actually set either URL, but it gives you a URL with the IP address so it doesn't have to translate through DNS to begin with. A bit of a complex thing to explain at the moment, but the main point is that here you can see Pi-hole up and running. You can see it provides me with query types, upstream servers. It can allow me to blacklist, to whitelist, etc. And it gives me a general network overview for things of that type. So yeah. Now I'm sorry, this is a bit of a flashbang of a screen here, but there's not a very easy way of explaining the VPN without a little extra steps. So in order for the VPN to be done, I had to set up port forwarding on my router. I had to go in to my router after I had bricked it originally. And as with Pi-hole, installation was mostly a matter of downloading the software. And after that point, you can create new users to utilize the functionalities of the VPN. Here on these three gray screens, you can see that I actually it was just a pretty simple GUI download that guided you right through it. And then in the terminal right here, you can see that after you enter the command sudo pi vpn add, it lets you set up a user. Now, from this point on my own computer, I had to go in and set up the OpenVPN software. But for the sake of this project, I'm strictly discussing that the Pi successfully got OpenVPN up and running, and that, yeah, it works as intended. All right. So troubleshooting. I had a few different things, and here I am. So, yeah, as I stated at the start of this, do not do this on a school network, please. Not only will ResNet not allow it, if you have a router like I have, they may get you into disciplinary trouble. So I did attempt this on a school network at first, and from this point on, I decided to use my personal router, which thank God I had it on hand. I do not recommend doing what I did, but it worked. I did have a personal router, as I just said, and I worked around this specifically. I had to go to my RA and ask about resident services to see, hey, can I set this up for a few minutes to make sure that my project is working? And then on the router, I set up the DNS as the IPv4 address of the Pi, and that didn't work. I discussed that a little bit earlier, and I worked around this by setting the DNS server addresses on my computer and on my phone to make sure that the ad block actually went through and that the ad block actually properly worked. Elsewise, for whatever reason, my network was completely and totally bricked. My router did not like me changing the DNS server to the Pi's IP at all, even when it was the correct IP. Not sure why this happened. I would like to think there's some reason why, but that's just the way things happened. So yeah, some lesson learned, or sorry, forgive me, some lessons learned and some personal input. I learned not to try this on an enterprise network. Do not do this on PAL 3.0. Bad idea. And this is something that would have made sense with closer attention to computer architecture, because that's a very wide area network, and it's an enterprise network, more importantly, which was one of the key things focused in on in one of the lectures, if I recall correctly. Now, I would love to do this project again. The issue, I would not love to do this project again in a dorm room. I would love to do it again at home. I think that the combination project here is wonderful. It's really useful and it's great. It certainly beats just using a Chrome extension, because you feel like you really did something. You have a sense of pride behind it, and I love that. I think this whole project was really neat, and I appreciated it. So, yeah, with that said, thank you all for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the semester, and I hope you all have a good summer. Thank you, and goodbye.